Courtney and Zeke and Michael asked me in the 10 a.m. To kind of give a little update or an overview of a website that I direct. And so maybe some of you guys have heard, but it's a website called IllBeHonest.com. And the church here has been helping support me in doing that for many years now, sending some money on a monthly basis. And so I know some of you all prayed for that, and as well as some of the money from the church is going to support that. And so I'm very thankful that the church is burdened in that. And I guess I want to help burden you guys more for the ministry that I'm seeking to do through the internet, through that website. Because that's if you're burdened for it, guess what happens? You pray for it. And when we're really burdened for things, we think about it, we pray for it, just like this funeral that just happened, on Thursday with these two young guys who died. That was easy to get burdened for. That we were praying, God, would you save someone? Would you open someone's eyes? And his family that just lost two of their children. So in short, when I was converted, I grew up in an environment that was, you could say, was very superficial. You guys know what superficial means? It wasn't real. People were simply not real. I felt like I had to wear a mask. I felt like I could not be genuine. I could not be honest. You would go to church, and what you did was you would put a show on. You wouldn't tell people about your struggles. You wouldn't tell people about your problems. It was more of a thing, if I say that, it's going to make me look bad. And so that's kind of the church I grew up in the environment I grew up in. Well, what did I naturally do as a young guy? I wanted help. Where do you think I looked? Hey, brother, good morning. Where do you think I looked for help from?
The world.
Well, not just the world, but yes, the world in a sense,
Yeah,
but specifically, the internet. The internet. Google has become a household name. It's a search engine. You go to google.com and you have a search engine, and you can search and you can find the answer for so many questions on there. Now, a lot of the answers you're going to find are false and wrong, and so you got to filter through things. But that's what I did. As a young person, I did not feel like anyone in the big church I went to I could approach, not even my own dad at the time, and say to my dad, I'm having all these problems, these struggles. I just felt like I couldn't go and tell someone that. And so what that led was me to go to the internet. And it's amazing when you go on the internet, you can Google in something. Say you struggle with depression. If you go Google overcoming depression, you know what you're going to find? A whole lot of different things being said. Some are going to be saying you need to take all these pills. Some are going to be saying do yoga. Some are going to say Christ. Some are going to say so many different things. And what I found is here I was as a young person, and the specific vice that had me as an unbeliever was sexual sin. And I was Googling, trying to find help on the internet for this problem. And what I did not find was real good help. I found things that pointed me in all the wrong directions, that weren't dealing with the root of the problem. So once the Lord saved me, 3 years later, I had a burden. I thought, you know what? I want people to be able to Google on the internet and find real help for the questions they're asking. And my specific burden was for this whole issue of all the sexual immorality in the world. I thought there's all these young people just like me who are Googling and they're looking, how do I get free of fill in the blank? And I thought, what are they going to find when they Google on the internet? And so that was really the big motivator for making this little website called IllBeHonest. It was wanting a place where we could really put honest answers for honest questions, where there was no superficiality. You think about the term IllBeHonest. Does anyone ever hear someone say I'll be honest? Just naturally. I would hear that growing up. And you know when I would hear it? It'd usually be after they said something. They would tell me, I think your car looks great. And then they say, I'll be honest, I think your car's ugly. Something like that. It was them being really honest. That's really what I think. I lied to you the first time. I was not really honest the first time, but I'll be honest with you, this is really what I think. So I heard that growing up. And I thought, I don't feel like people are being honest with me. I don't feel like I can be honest with people. And so that was kind of what led to the name, I'll Be Honest, and to the website, was just seeing a need there for sincerity. And you think about, what's one thing the Apostle Paul commended in his ministry? He said, as men of sincerity, we commend ourselves to you. The Apostle Paul also said, he said, our hearts are wide open to you. Think of that. My heart is wide open. It's right out there for you. And that's how Paul lived. That's how we as Christians should live. And so that was kind of the burden of this ministry. I want to be honest with people. Because where do people really get help with their soul in these hard questions? It's with giving honest answers. But where do the answers got to come from? The Bible. There's a lot of people saying they're going to be honest. But ultimately we've got to be honest from the Word of God, the Bible. The Bible. So, you know, I was saved when I was 21, so it was around 7.5 years ago, when the internet had already been something that was booming. Everyone didn't have smartphones back then. That started to happen in the next years. It just started to become common. Everyone had a smartphone. Everyone had technology. I mean, the amount of people Googling for help on specific things was crazy. And, you know, even in the last 7 years, I'll be honest, almost every day we get at least one email that deals with the topic of specifically of sexual sin, of people Googling, looking for help with that specific thing. I have responded to thousands of emails on that one topic of how do I overcome sexual sin? What does this mean? How do I deal with this issue in my life? I mean, it's incredible. So one thing to pray about with I'll Be Honest is counseling. You know, a big thing that my time and some others in the church in San Antonio that we invest our time in is counseling. And you know what's difficult with counseling people through the internet? You got an email from them. I don't know them face to face. They basically send in an email, and how do I respond? How do I dissect that email and take different things they said to give them a biblical response in order to help them to get to the root of the problem? That's not easy. It's much easier when someone comes into GCC Laredo and you get to talk to them face to face. Then you're able to deal with them and know, what's really going on. You know, a lot of people wrongly don't feel like they can approach people in the church. Even a church like this, a good church, a lot of real Christians who love the Lord. You know what's going to happen here, though? Even here, you will feel scared at times to go to other Christians and to admit different struggles and look for help. And that's just because of our own pride. And so I even realized that we need to get stuff on the internet, even because people will wrongly, cowardly not go to those in the church, and they'll seek for answers elsewhere, which isn't a good thing to do. I mean, we had years ago someone emailed in saying they were thinking about committing suicide. And I read the email address, and I thought, that's odd. It rang a bell. Or Bethany, I think, walked by, and she said, I recognize that email address. And it was someone from a solid church who had emailed in. And you know what they said in the email? They said, I feel like there's no one in my own church that I can go and talk to. Well, that was a complete lie. They were in a solid church, and here they are thinking, I need to kill myself, and they're doing different things of self-affliction in their life, and yet they didn't even feel like they could go to the leaders in their church. Well, the reason, that's their own pride. That's bad. So one thing with an internet ministry is there's too many people trying to just live off of things on the internet, but you can't do that. And that's one of the negatives. Even as this church, you guys video sermons of Jeremy and Zeke, and these sermons are going on the internet, if someone runs into those sermons and is helped by them, they cannot be content just living off of that. They've got to have an actual church body where they can use their gifts and build one another up. Because it's very easy to be a quote Christian and not be in a church. Because where do you get tested with loving one another? In this building, throughout the week. You know, where do I run into issues of failing to love? It's with real people. And so that's one of the pitfalls of trying to do something on the internet. And one thing with I'll Be Honest, we continually try to put sermons and videos up that rebuke the mindset that you can just be an internet Christian. And we have one of Brother Tim Conway where he talks about 5 options to find a solid church. He says move to find one, start your own, do whatever it takes basically, because you don't want to be content as a Christian without having a solid church. So I'm kind of going all over the place. I had a couple brief notes. So Jeremy said to mention how it began. I guess I've kind of done that. The website began out of a burden to be honest. Even in the beginning, I tried to video different people's personal testimonies, because I myself as a young kid, when you heard someone be really honest in their testimony, that to me was unheard of. And it gave me a safe haven that, hey, I can go to them, they're real. They've been through the same struggles that I have been through, and I'm gonna talk to them. Let's see here. You think about the internet. The internet is literally virtually free to get content out. I've posted over 900 sermons and videos to YouTube. 900. And guess how much YouTube has charged me? 0. It's incredible. I did statistics. This is from 6 months ago, I think. We had 25,652,000 video views. Now, if I was to take every one of those video views and make it into turn it into a track, say every one of them was me giving a physical track, because that's what the internet is. You're giving people digital tracks through their phone, through their computer. If those 25,652,000 views were all tracks at 4 cents a track, and that's a good average on a good track, it would have cost $1,026,000 to make that many tracks. $1 million to get that many tracks. And yet here the internet has given an ability, a door, to do it for free. As I was talking to the church at home in San Antonio recently, one of the biggest burdens that I've had is doing translations. And one thing you can pray for is that God would raise up translators. Because we have the website right now in 31 languages. And Paul talked in the Bible about there being no more work in a region. And you think about the English-speaking world. Do we lack solid theological resources on the internet in the English-speaking world? We don't. You could take this little website, I'll be honest, and delete it from the internet, and that wouldn't make a big deal. You've got all these other massive ministries like John Piper's Desiring God, John MacArthur, all these others that have solid truth in the English world. But you know what's really lacking out there is resources in other languages. I mean, it is so, you go Romanian, you don't have a lot. Even in French, you don't have a lot. Arabic, you have hardly any. And so that is one of my biggest burdens lately, is praying for God to bring translators. Even recently, a young Ukrainian guy, he's from Ukraine, he now lives in California, he started to help translate some videos into Ukrainian. This is the thing though, with the internet, when you're able to get a video translated, it's not just that you can put that up, say on YouTube, you're able to specifically target it to that country. So for example, we took a video of Paul Washer and an Arabic interpreter and made a 7-minute clip out of it in Arabic, and we paid for an ad to show up in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt. We paid for that. And so it's like we're paying for digital tracks to go into people's computers and phones, mainly mobile phones, in those countries. And it's incredible the ability we have from our computer to reach people all over the world. And so that's been one of the burdens. Years ago, I had a 16-year-old guy in Tehran, Iran, in a Muslim household, video Skype with me, a 16-year-old in Iran. And we're Skyping. He had ran into the video about how do I overcome pornography, and we started to have a conversation on Skype. He's a Muslim. I mean, those are incredible open doors that we can have through the internet. And those are some of the things that I'm facing, and I need God's help on how to deal with, to have wisdom how to counsel people that they be won to Christ. You know, one of the dangers with any type of internet ministry, even y'all's church putting sermons on the internet, you know, the fact is we can do that, and we can think things are being so much more fruitful than they are, but the fact is we really need to see conversions. And it's one thing to say, hey, there's been 25 million video views on a website. It's another thing to say, hey, here's some real people who are truly converted and they're continuing on with the Lord. And that's something to pray for. So I'm sharing all this because I was asked to give a report on IllBeHonest, and the hope is that it helped burden you guys for prayer. And so yeah, like I mentioned, languages. One thing I want to challenge you guys on too. Do you ever think about those in other language groups? It's very easy. People here speak Spanish and English. I doubt anyone knows any other language here. Spanish and English. And we think about everyone who speaks Spanish, everyone English, we can reach them. But think about how big the world is. Me and Michael were just looking at that map over there earlier. That is a big world with a lot of languages. And people need the truth. And one thing to consider as a Christian is learning another language and going to another people group where they don't even speak your language. So that's one thing I've been challenged with through the IllBeHonest website. You know, another thing we faced recently, we had one sister in Paris, France, and she's translated over 100 sermons into French, and we've put them on the internet. And a lot of people are now running into them, and it seems like God is moving in France. Well, guess what problem you now run into? Here we've got people watching a website on the internet from a country, but we don't have a local church. That's a big problem. We need a church. You can't just say, this is great, let's keep translating videos and throwing them on the internet. No, we need a church. There needs to be a church in France to forward people there. And so that's one of the things to pray for is laborers. Who in our churches is qualified, burdened, and able to say move to a place like France in order to help plant a church that we could then point people to. And you know, that's a lot of what happened in Mexico. Joseph Urban, they started a church in Mexico City. The first meeting, 100 people came because that many people were watching things on the internet. And they just put out a little note on their Facebook and on their website that we're going to seek to establish a church in Mexico City. The very first Sunday, 100 people came. And why? All these people hearing things through the internet, yet there was no solid church. In the first moment a solid church was established, people hopped on it. And so that's the same thing in other countries. And so I guess I say that because internet ministry is very small. It's very minor. It's easy to look at it as, oh wow, we can reach the world, and we can. But without local churches, you know, you can make a website, you can put videos up, and you can be full of pride and think you're doing a whole lot, and in the end, it's not really doing a whole lot if we're not seeing churches established and people discipled. Go make disciples, Jesus has commanded us to do. So, what else to say on all that? You know, one verse I remember reading just years ago in 2 Corinthians 6:3, Paul said something very challenging to me. He said, we put no obstacle in anyone's way so that no fault may be found with our ministry. Now in the context there, he just, in verse 20 of the previous chapter, was talking about how we're all ambassadors for Christ. And then he goes on to say, we put no obstacle in anyone's way so that no fault may be found with our ministry. One thing you can pray for me as I direct this little website is that I would not put obstacles in anyone's way. You know what I mean by that? Obstacles. As we minister to people, even as y'all as a church minister to people, you can put obstacles in people's ways and fault is found with your ministry. Example, if this church had a legalistic tendency in some way, and you guys were bringing out the law and really trying to, you all need to do this cookie cutter model if you're going to be part of the church, fault would be found with the ministry. there'd be an obstacle. It'd keep people from being helped by the ministry. The same thing with internet ministries. We can put obstacles in people's ways. And I've mentioned this before, but as a new Christian, you know what? I came from a video gaming background and I was lost. And so as a new Christian, I just thought, oh wow, that sounds so powerful, Paul Washer preaching about the wrath of God. And I just put all the drums and sound effects and everything, and I put it with Paul Washer preaching. And I thought, that sounds cool. It's like a movie trailer. And I made some very excessive clips that I did not use music in an appropriate way. It was a distraction. And I remember reading that verse, thinking, no fault found. And that kept going on my conscience. That, oh, you know what? I made those videos as a new Christian. I feel like they're overly dramatic and they just cause emotional false fire. And so I ended up deleting a whole lot of those because it was on my conscience. Fault was being found with the ministry that I was a part of, and I had to deal with it. And so that's one thing continually we're all doing as Christians. Is there any fault found with my personal ministry seeking as an ambassador of Christ to get men reconciled to God? Is there any fault with the way I'm ministering to people? Am I putting a stumbling block, an obstacle in anyone's way? And that's something we've got to humbly ask ourselves at different points. So yeah, a big burden is to reach the lost. A lot of the lost are going through the internet, and that's a place we can get content out and help people, but we just can't be content with just having that. Jeremy mentioned talk about its upkeep.
Things like any resources you may have to put into it, hosting. I know that some of that, but is just even man hours for uploading videos, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the church has been supporting me for I think 5 years now, or 4 years. So I work on. I mean, I have a lot to do, and other things, but I work on the web. I try to work on the website, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day. Try to put a new English video up every 3 days, and I'm working with all sorts of translators. And that's one thing I need. I need more laborers to help me. Someone else could come in, and they could be the one working with all these translators, taking these translated subtitles and rendering them on the videos. And that's something you could pray for me. I mean, even this very week, I was thinking I'm 100 emails behind. And I've got all this stuff, and it's just overwhelming. And I need the Lord to give more labor. I've tried to get people involved over the years, but some just lose interest or aren't diligent, and they just fall out of it. And so pray that God would give someone who's really driven. I feel like I'm driven. My wife, she's not here right now, so I can mention this. She worked for a woman at an OBGYN who was a lieutenant in the Russian military. A lieutenant in the Russian military. My wife was single, she worked there, and the lady was Dr. Anastasia Soloviana. And I mean, Bethany got chewed out all the time. I don't chew my wife out, by the grace of God. But what was my point? Her dad had said to her, he said, your wife, or he said to Bethany, he said, your boss is preparing you to marry James because he's really driven and he's going to drive you. And so we need Christians like that. We all need to be more driven. Who here could say that they're driven enough for the things of the Lord? I mean, no one, I don't think any of us are here today and we think, you know what? Yeah, I pretty much got to the top. I don't need any more drive for Jesus Christ. No, we need that. It's a fight. It's easy to have drooping hands and knees. So yeah, thankfully, there has been no financial needs in this ministry ever since it started. The Lord has graciously provided every need. And we've purposed to never put a donate button on the website. We don't want anyone to get any impression we even care about money. If this is a ministry that God is in, then the church that it's a part of should be able to help support it. If the church isn't willing to support it, then maybe it's just not a worthy effort to be doing. Yeah, you think about emails. You think we get so many emails, and emails, it's kind of like a hospital online. That's how I view it. I go in as a sole doctor, I check in every morning, I look at what patients have submitted their applications for help. And that is one of the biggest burdens. That's one of the most time-consuming things, is trying to be accessible for those trying to access you and being able to respond to emails and to help people and things. So you can pray for me. Pray for me that God would give me wisdom and counsel. Pray that God would raise up more people who are able to counsel. You think about what Paul said in Romans, I think it's 14:15. Paul said this in Romans 14:15. He's writing to the church at Rome. That's something to remember. This is to the church. I think it's 15:14, not 14:15. Yeah, 15:14. Look what Paul says. I myself am satisfied about you. This isn't to these apostles. This is to the church at Rome. My brothers, that you yourselves are full of goodness. Paul's saying that to all of you guys. With all knowledge, filled with all knowledge, and look what he says, and able to instruct one another. The Apostle Paul, after dealing with the gospel throughout the first 11 chapters, he goes into these closing chapters, and one of the things he comes away with believing will happen in the Christian's life is they're going to be able to instruct one another. They're going to be competent enough to counsel others. And so that's something we should believe. No one should think as a Christian, you know what, I'm never going to get to that point where I can be competent to instruct others from the Word of God. Paul expects that every one of us who's a Christian should be able to do that. So I challenge you with that. And that's something that I pray. It's like, Lord, if Paul says to the church at Rome that they're full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, and able to instruct one another, then raise more up like that who are able to help out. You have some ministries where they have 20 people in a room, all with their phones, and people are calling websites getting help all day long from false ministries that are giving heretical answers. They call in, I need help. Well, if you give more money, guess what? God's going to bless you. And if those ministries can be that zealous to respond with their false teaching and damage people, how much more with solid teaching should we be accessible for those trying to reach us in order to respond and give them biblical help? And so, you think about the Mormons. If you go on the internet, one of the most accessible groups on the internet is the Mormons. If you go type in the Gospel of Jesus Christ on Google, one of the first things you're going to get is the Mormon website. If you don't know what the Mormons are, they are a cult. They teach a false gospel. I go into a whole lot more on why that is. I'm making that hard statement, but I'm assuming most of y'all know that. But the Mormons, you can go and you can ask to speak to someone near where you live. Just like that. You can contact them. They'll put you in contact with someone, a Mormon missionary, right in your area, in your city, in your neighborhood. That's incredible. They have it all set up like that. And that's, as we have the internet at our disposal, we want to more be able to help people like that and point people in different directions and be accessible as churches. What time do we got, by the way? We got a clock in the back. Okay. If none of that burdens you to pray, well, I'm sorry. Pray for me. Even the verse I'm going to preach on in the 11 today. Well, pray for me. I need to keep persevering. I am persevering. But it's amazing, as time goes on and you're repetitiously doing the same thing over and over again, you have to ultimately keep yourself encouraged in Jesus. Because Jesus Christ is why we labor and toil. It has nothing to do with, just for the sake of ministry. If you do something just for the sake of ministry, you're going to get burned out pretty fast. That's why a lot of people go to the missions field, they burn out really fast, because it's not about Christ. It's not them walking with Christ. It's just they want to do something. And so, we need to be content with what God has given us to do. At the same time, have a discontentment that, Lord, I want to do more for your kingdom, but what is that more? What does that look like? Any questions?
How do you, you're an elder in San Antonio, how do you balance sort of the responsibilities that you have with IllBeHonest with now also overseeing the church and preaching and such?
Yeah, I guess there's out of the 5 of us who are elders who pastor in San Antonio, me and Tim are the only 2 who are supported. Tim is specifically supported for years now to preach and teach. Talks about that in Timothy, about those who are laboring in preaching and teaching. And he specifically labors in that. All us other 4, in a sense, work jobs. So in a way you could say my job is to do IllBeHonest. So just like Tafiq goes to school and teaches special ed at a school, I go in my house and work on the website. And so I one thing I've realized, a lot of people in the church, guess where they're at during the work hours? They're at work themselves. It's not like I can wake up and think, oh, I need to counsel that guy, meet with that guy, and I can just go meet with them. They're at their jobs. I need to do that in the evening. And so that's kind of how I do it. I mean, I'm not perfectly balanced. I still feel like I can spend too much time trying to respond to emails on the internet and could neglect different needs in the church. And that's why I need God to raise up people in the church to help counsel so that I don't have to be bearing that burden as much as I am in order to be able to do more pastoring with different needs. I have a Richard Baxter quote on my wall from Reformed Pastor, and he just talks there about how if you see the sheep hurt, don't wait for them to come to you, but go to them at once before it is too late. And that's been a convicting quote because it's, there's different things. You can feel like you don't respond to things quick enough. It's easier to respond to people on the internet anyways. It's harder to talk to people face to face that you've got a long relationship with and if you offend someone in an email who doesn't go to your church, it couldn't cause a church split. But if you offend someone in the local body you're a part of, there's a lot more intimidation in dealing with some of those things. But so I don't know, I'm still learning how to balance all of it. But I feel like I get burned out sometimes. So, and look, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you can get burned out. We get burned out, whoever we are, no matter what we're doing. It doesn't matter whether it's full-time ministry type things. Ultimately, we are all full-time for Christ, trying to minister to people, whatever context we're in. So I have a lot to learn. Even recently, I just felt like God needs to keep crushing me of pride and different things, and He does that. He knows our Achilles heel. He knows our greatest areas of weaknesses, and He continues to put things to test us and to break us, to make us more like Jesus Christ. So I'm thankful He's doing that to me. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you like your job?
Yeah, I have a lot of joy. It's a privilege to be able to serve the Lord in this way. So I have a whole lot of joy doing that. I mean, even different people who the Lord has seemingly saved that have endured. It's very encouraging. And so I'm very encouraged and have a lot of joy. But we all want to step we all want to step it up a notch. No Christian is satisfied where they're at. Now some are, but eventually God's going to do things to ruffle their feathers where they're not. And He's going to make you want more. And so I just want more. Want to do more. I mean, even with the website, what more can be done? What more, what different things? And so I need God's wisdom.
Are there any encouraging testimonies of people, you talked about conversions and really seeing the Lord bless the ministry. Are there any that stand out to you that maybe you could share, maybe one or two?
Well, I know there's that one I shared in San Antonio, but there's a guy. He cut off all communication with his mother for 20 years. Never talked to his mom for 20 years. And she died. And she wrote a letter giving him the gospel, telling him to get help. She hadn't talked to him in 20 years. And he came to her funeral. And the mother, or someone at the funeral, gave the son the letter. And he read that. And he was not initially struck, but God dealt with that man's heart and started to strip him down. And he was a theistic Satanist, had been involved in many crimes, just horrific things. And this guy went and Googled on the internet and ran into IllBeHonest and emailed, long email, wondering if he could even be forgiven. And so we started to email, to dialogue, back and forth, just tearing down false ideas he was believing, misrepresentations about who God is, etc., giving him hope, giving him the gospel. And he was converted. I really believe that. He just emailed me a couple days ago, and I think this happened 7 or 8 months ago. And so that has been very encouraging. But again, it's a reminder, someone doesn't just make a profession and you're at rest. They've got to get to the end. And this guy is in a horrible situation where he lives. His wife has done horrible things to try to make him a hypocrite. She's brought, she works in an abortion clinic. She has brought baby parts home in a bag as a present to give it to him, to try to get him to mock the Lord. She's doing all sorts of sin, all sorts of things. And here this guy is, and there's no church where he's at. No church, no Christians that he can be in fellowship with. And so he's in a hard spot. But even there, I'm trying to bear with this man. Yes, he began a good work and you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. But we still need to persevere with each other. And so I'm still seeking to persevere with this one man who I've never met face to face and just know through the internet, who was saved out of a theistic Satanist background. And he was involved in all sorts of things. And murder. He was involved in murder. And so different things, and it's amazing just seeing God save. And that was one thing that encouraged me so much, because it's just a reminder of the power of the gospel. Here a guy emails, his mom had been praying for him for 20 years. She dies, and then he runs into a website on the internet and gets the truth that the Lord's arm is not short that it cannot save, his ear is not deaf that it cannot hear. And to see that this man, what happened? What did I give him? What did Paul say? We preached Christ and Him crucified. I didn't have some fancy formula. It didn't matter. That could have been a 12-year-old kid who was, like Don Johnson, convicted in his conscience because he shot a bird and killed the bird, and he felt like he was a murderer. It could have been that guy. I would have given him the same truths, the gospel. Yes, different things, truths about the gospel for them in their situation, but. So yeah, that's one testament that's been very encouraging to me, and a reminder. We've got to keep praying for people once they profess. I tend to not overly rejoice when someone says they've been converted. And part of it has been just seeing so many people say that and then fall away. And that doesn't mean I have unbelief, I don't think, but just realizing, all right, let's press on together. And that's what happened in John 6. Thousands left, and Jesus said to the 12, do you guys want to go away as well? And Peter said on behalf of the 12, he said, Lord, who shall we go? You have the words of life. And so just seeing even this brother do that, and even praying to see his wife converted. So that's a labor. Who prays enough? I feel like I miserably fail in my prayer life, that I miserably fail praying for all those that I've had contact with. There's so many people that I know who I'm not consistently praying for, and that is convicting. And I realize you can't condemn yourself. There's a place, certain people, God burdens you to pray. But I think, that's one big thing to hit on. If I look back at the last 7 years that I've been doing the IllBeHonest thing, I guarantee you, if I would pray more for different people who it seemed were converted and emailed in, then there would be more fruit. And so I think that's one area I failed. You can be very busy doing a whole lot, and then you're not really praying on behalf of these people. There are times I get on my knees to pray in my room, and all of a sudden I'm hit with all these thoughts. I need to go do this. I need to render this. And the impulse is to stand up and get back to work and not pray, It's incredible how easy it is to be distracted in those things, and we need God's help in that. But that's one testimony that's very encouraging. And it's encouraging to me to keep praying for people, even if you die. They go to your funeral and they get a letter, and it leads to their conversion. And even this guy, a theistic Satanist, involved in all sorts of crimes and things, and yet God's gospel of His Son was able to save the man from his sins. So.